we have a good audience. So we'll give, I guess, give it a few more minutes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Should we go ahead and start, Hillary? You're muted, but I'm going to take that as a yes.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I'm muted now. So I think we can start and people can continue to join.
Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. I want to welcome everyone to this event. It's been in the works since last summer when Hillary brought this project to my attention. Hillary Brown directs the Sustainability and Urban Environment Program, and we've had to reschedule this a number of times, so I'm excited that we're finally going to hear about this work. Professor Brown is an architect whose specialty is in urban sustainability, and for the past 10 years, she's focused on urban systems of energy, water, and sanitation and solid waste. She's specifically interested in synergistic urban systems where the waste output from one system becomes the input to another. This aligns with the recent emphasis on closed loop principles of the so-called circular economy. So the work that we're going to hear about today is that was done by a number of her students who've put the circular economy principles to work in developing a plan to address the problems of climate change that affect the indigenous Wayúu people in northern Colombia. Specifically, the problems are water stress and food insecurity as a result of desertification, the area turning into a desert. The plan that's developed by former City College students in our sustainability program in collaboration with undergraduates and graduate students in both engineering and architecture has recently attracted the attention of a number of non-governmental organizations. So the students you'll hear from this afternoon graduated last year, but their work on making this plan a reality continues, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. I'm going to turn the floor over now to Professor Brown, who will introduce the speakers. And before I do that, can I just remind everybody to please mute your microphones as I'm about to do now, so we don't interrupt the talk with extra noise. So Professor Brown.
Great. Thank you so very much, Tony, particularly for hosting this event. Before I introduce the two speakers, I wanted to give a little bit of context to this presentation. I teach a course each spring that introduces students to what I call a whole systems approach to infrastructure and related sector planning. So we're looking at the interdependencies and particularly the potential synergies across energy, water, waste, and the food sectors and other enterprises. So that waste from one system is used beneficially in another. So each year, the students collectively complete a conceptual design exercise, usually cited in a developing country, where they assess local environmental conditions, as well as local resources. And then they research alternative low impact technologies that can be organized in a framework that optimizes all of these exchanges, as you will see. So the two former sustainability students came to CCNY from Colombia, Veronica Franco and Nuri Gutierrez, from architecture and engineering backgrounds, respectively, and now graduates. And they brought this to my attention, this humanitarian crisis experienced by the Wayúu peoples, who occupy an area in northernmost Colombia. So that location became the 9-week-long focus of the class. Some 21 students working in teams. We identified a potential site, and then the students pretty much self-organized the work, leading to the proposed solution that you will see. So let me introduce them now to present the work. And I just wanted to add that the project now is described in a small publication with a link on the last slide for those of you who might be interested. So I'll turn it over to Nuri, and she can proceed with the presentation. Thanks so very much.
Thank you, Hilary. Well, as Hilary mentioned, the project is located in the northernmost part of Colombia in a region called La Guajira. This region is surrounded by the Caribbean Sea, neighboring with Venezuela.
Nuri, we're seeing the first slide, not the map.
Yeah. Can you advance?
Can you see it?
No.
No.
Sorry, let me put the presentation again. Sorry about that. Okay. I was speaking about this slide. So as Hilary mentioned, the project is located in the northernmost part of Colombia. This region is called La Guajira and it's surrounded by the Caribbean Sea and neighboring with Venezuela. Here is the site of the project. This site is accessible by road, rail, and air. You can see here on the left, one of the earliest private wind projects, the Hepirachi. And you can also see in this image, the dryness and lack of vegetation of the area. And who are the Wayúu? The Wayúu are an indigenous group mostly located in the Media and Alta Guajira and some areas in Venezuela. They are organized in 21 reservations and live in rancherias, which are households where the traditional family is composed by 5 to 10 people. They have a matrilineal social organization, which means that a family is defined by the maternal blood and they are divided by clans. Many Wayúu strongly adhere to their traditions and continue to speak their native language, Guayunaiki. According to the 2018 Colombian census, there are 380,000 Wayúus in total, making them the biggest indigenous group in the country. More than half of them are women. 70% of the population are under the age of 25 and 60% of them are illiterate. The Wayúu is an empowered community. They have managed to preserve their unique culture and adapt to the region's landscape and harsh conditions. Women are key role in the economy and are in charge of the households, cooking, looking out for the kids, and commerce. They are talented weavers, a common practice passed down through generations of women. They sell chinchorros, which are hammocks that they make themselves, mochilas, hats, clothes, and jewelry, highly valued in the global market. On the other hand, men are in charge of livestock, horticulture, fishing, and hunting. For the Wayúu people, goats represent power and wealth, and they are used as a means of currency. Unfortunately, what used to be the Wayúu's traditional means of self-sufficiency, like agriculture harvested twice a year, and raising animals is no longer possible. The latest year, 90% of the Wayúu animals have died. La Guajira region is also rich in solar and wind power. Therefore, the government is planning to expand renewable energy production from 2 to 9% and is projecting to build 67 wind parks during the upcoming years in the Wayúu territory. This end-of-the-world type of landscape, the sacred dunes and beautiful beaches not only attract private energy enterprises, but also adventurous tourists searching for authentic experiences. The Wayúu greatly have used this as their main mean of subsistence. La Guajira suffers from lack of government action, depletion of resources and corruption, mine pollution and extreme climate instability, to mention the least. This has made La Guajira one of the 3 regions in Colombia with the highest poverty rate and the highest percentage of people with unsatisfied basic needs. The Wayúu community being the most affected, they often have women and children having to walk long distances to access to water. According to the Colombian Constitutional Court, by 2016, 4,800 children have died of malnutrition or associated causes during the preceding 8 years. This prolonged complexity of structural problems have led the region and the indigenous Wayúu into a humanitarian crisis, putting the existence of their culture at risk. Therefore, innovative solutions are needed to help the Wayúu adapt and preserve their traditional livelihoods.
The vision for the project as a humanitarian response is based on reciprocities and exchanges between the different components, creating a resiliency hub or an oasis for the Wayúu and visitors in the middle of the desert. It will provide basic infrastructure for water, food production, and energy while enhancing the local economy. The cross-cutting opportunities will be further explained. In this diagram, the interconnection and exchange of resources and materials between the different components and technologies is illustrated. Similar to nature's linked processes, the project system framework promotes cycling of wastes from one activity to another, resulting in an efficient use of resources and waste prevention. On the top of the diagram, you can see the seaweed cultivation system. Below it lies the seawater greenhouse structure powered by solar panels. It is also connected to the solar cells and water storage tanks. On the lower right, you can see the touristic accommodations. Also beside it, the cultural center and restaurant, followed by the goats grazing area and the terrace cropping systems. An example of this resource exchange showed by the different arrows in the diagram is explained by, for example, using the organic waste from the restaurant. This can go to the compost system, and then this can be used as fertilizer for the agriculture. Next. In this slide, you can see the different studies done in La Guajira showing that the region has experienced increasing severe El Niño events. Most rainfall occurs during just 2 months of the year, while the rest receives 0 to low rainfall. The region has little change in temperature throughout the year. This means that it has continuous evaporation. Although the region stays humid throughout the year and cloudy as well, La Guajira has an average temperature of 28 degrees Celsius throughout the year. In order to address this water acute scarcity, several low-tech and low-energy intensive water catchment systems were envisioned. One of them is the Vodka Tower. This technology traps dew, fog, air, and rain from the air. It was built using cheap materials and it can be installed by locals. This technology was initially constructed in Ethiopia by Arturo Vitoli architects, and it's already used in many parts of the world. In addition, 2 other types of technologies were proposed, which are solar steels. The first one is a double-wick solar steel, and the second one, the primitive solar steel. The distilled water will be stored in an uphill tank, and allow for gravity-based drip irrigation. A cool thing about this system is that the same water pipes used by the seawater greenhouse by day will be used to transport seawater to the solar stills by night. The seawater greenhouse technology is a multi-purpose technology that not only produces water and food, but salt as a byproduct for commercialization. It has already been proven in some of the most driest areas of the world, and it can play an important role in preventing water and food-based conflicts. Its only inputs are seawater and sunlight. This technology was invented by Charlie Payton in 1991, a British designer, and it's being built already in the Canary Islands, the Middle East, Australia, and most recently, Somaliland. The Somaliland structure was designed for water and food insecure populations without economic means. It uses a light construction. It uses cheap local materials. And this structure was the template and example that the students from the course used to propose their design for La Guajira region. On your left of the slide, you can see the original Somaliland structure in a deserted climate, and towards your left and towards your right, you can see the student's proposal for La Guajira complex. So how does it function? If you see on the slide from left to right, the front of the greenhouse faces the prevailing winds. It's composed of a porous cardboard panel or evaporator. In some cases, fans are also used to supplement airflow. Seawater is drawn from an adjacent well and trickles down the front of the cardboard evaporator. The evaporation process cools the air temperature inside the structure and optimizes plant growth. The porous evaporator also filters out dust, pollen, and pests. As the clean air passes through the greenhouse, it is further heated by the sun, taking up even more moisture. This supersaturated air is then condensed at the end of the pipes, and where it touches cold seawater filled pipes, and then this is where the distilled water is produced. The water that is available and already desalinated can be pumped to storage tanks, and it can be used for both agriculture, and the surplus can be used for potable water. But basically, the most important benefit of the process inside the seawater greenhouse is the combination of lower temperature and higher humidity that reduces plant transpiration up to 10-fold and enables crop production in a hot, arid climate. In order to maximize this effect, the students proposed the use of permacultural practices or intercropping, which is the cultivation of 2 or more crops simultaneously on the same field. Some of the benefits of intercropping include structural support of one plant by another, shade, natural pest controls, and nitrogen fixation. 2 types of crops considered inside of each of the structure include, first, a tropical zone that will be used to grow native plants used in the original Wayúu diet, which are melons, bananas, peppers, and beans. And in the second structure, it's a temperate zone that can be used to grow lettuce, tomatoes, spinach, and these plants can be used in the restaurant's visitor center. Basically, the seawater greenhouse structure creates a local microclimate just outside the back of the structure. This oasis effect increases humidity and lowers the air temperature, and it favors crops to grow in the area. So basically here, the students propose planting melons, citrus trees, guajirito beans, and desert marigolds. That desert marigolds provide pest control and wind barriers. The lack of nutrients and semi-arid conditions have degraded the soil quality in the coastal region of La Guajira. Basically, low-cost techniques, including drip irrigation, soil bands, opuscular mycorrhizal fungi inoculation, and compost, were proposed by the students to restoring the soil conditions and aid plant growth. These techniques are meant to be used in tandem with one another to help close nutrient cycles, enhance biodiversity, and strengthen crop resilience. The use of multi-purpose or multifunctional technologies was at the core of the system's design. Basically, photovoltaic panels and agriculture production were integrated to increase combined yields. Some of the benefits for the animals include protection and shade from the intense sun of La Guajira, and some of the benefits for the crops include reducing plants' evapotranspiration, which means decreasing the use of water. In order to take advantage of the catchment surface that the panels create, a gutter can be attached to the lower end of the panels, and if any rainfall does happen, it can be saved into a cistern and then provide irrigation for the crop. For underneath the solar panels and in the terrace agriculture systems, the students proposed using a beautiful ancient indigenous cultivation technique called the Three Sisters. Here, the indigenous planted corn, squash, and beans together in the same plot. For the complex, the students proposed replacing these three species with sorghum, cassava, caupeoa, which is another bean used in the Wayúu diet. Basically, sorghum is a good substitute for corn, and it needs less water and can also be used as an input for the biodigester. The cassava is a native species to the area and is a drought-resistant plant. Again, this intercropping technique is part of the site's permacultural strategies. Next. Okay, sorry. The animal husbandry included within the food security. Animal husbandry is included within the food security components. Raising livestock is part of the Wayúu culture. The amount of animals that each family has is a sign of their social and economic status, and goats are key in the Wayúu diet. Rotational grazing can improve conditions for both animals and plants. It consists of concentrating the animals into a grazing area in a specific period of time, allowing the rest of the plots to replenish. A study in Mexico showed that the use of native vegetation in the goat's diet, like trupillo, pea pods, dividilla, which can be seen in the photo, can increase the milk productivity. Biodigesters are another example of multi-purpose technology. A 15 cubic meter fixed dome biodigester is purposed near the goat corral. The digester will collect human excreta from the complex toilets, animal manure from the goat's production, and it will be combined with agricultural waste. Through a process of anaerobic digestion, methane can be harvested and used for cooking. This will produce enough gas to supply for the entire complex. The residue or bioslurry created from this process can then be further processed and used as fertilizer. A couple of seaweed cultivation studies have been made in La Guajira. 3 crop species were cultivated using these floating rafts as armature. One of them, the Uchima biciforme, it's actually used locally to make a drink and dessert known as simas that you can see in the picture. Similar to intercropping, seaweed cultivation can be complemented with breeding scallops, mussels, and other fish in a circular model system. In these maps, you can see that La Guajira has the greatest solar energy potential out of all departments in Colombia. Nonetheless, 55% of the households in rural areas of La Guajira have no access to electricity. This represents a huge opportunity for photovoltaic generation on the territory. Various technologies will supply energy for the complex and the hospitality services. The students proposed installing 2 systems, 2 solar PV farms of 27 kilowatts in the cultivation areas and 1 battery storage center. The energy production was quantified by the students as well and calculated to support the complex needs. Cost estimates were also included. Again, this slide shows that maybe even greater than La Guajira's solar energy potential, it's the region's wind energy potential, with wind speeds averaging between 8 to 12 miles per second throughout the year. As stated earlier, this phenomenon has attracted utility companies to the area for wind farm development. However, these are taking place on the Wayúu traditional land, and it has become a significant source of local concern. As you can see, wind energy can be a reliable source and substitute of energy to the solar system during cloudy weather. Backup generators will also kick in to meet the community's needs. The selected turbine shown in the slide has a convenient cost, installation and maintenance characteristics. It can be lowered by 2 people in case of a tropical storm, and it has a small foundation using very few concrete. And this can be installed easily without using specialized equipment in very harsh climatic conditions. Lastly, this slide shows how the electricity delivery throughout the complex would rely on a microgrid system based on 3 phases. The first phase consists of installing self-sufficient systems with specified energy sources. In the second phase, all the energy systems will be interconnected within the complex and to a battery storage. And in the third phase, in the future, when the distribution lines are available to this remote area in the country, this microgrid system can then be connected to the national grid. Next.
Thank you. Another component of the proposal of the students is the ecotourism. This slide represents a campaign done by the students. Bienvenidos a la ecoranchería La Guajira. This is a touristic proposal that took into account the region's potential, the richness of the Wayúu culture and their traditions. The goal is not only to profit or it's not to find a source of revenue, but to benefit the local community and the natural world they relied on, a concept which is called regenerative tourism. At the site, visitors can have just as much fun and relaxation as they can do in any other resort, but in a meaningful way. A typical day could look like going on a fishing tour, have your catch cooked for you at the local restaurant with your served with produce locally grown. At sunset, bike to a traditional storytelling event, and then lay back and sip some chirinchi in a handcrafted hammock. Looking to develop a local economy, the students propose economic opportunities that will not only bring income to the Wayúu, but also reinforce their traditional ways of living. These include tourism, where a limited number of volunteers can work and live with the Wayúu farmers. They can interact with them while helping the community with their activities. The Jemeinshu Wuin complex can be visited by other tourists visiting in La Guajira. Wayúu dancing classes and weaving workshops could drive more tourists. Visitors will also be able to enjoy the Wayúu native cuisine, enjoying dishes such as fish and goats grown in their own complex. Artisanal liquors such as chirinchi, an artisanal type of rum made out of water and panela, a type of brown sugar, are culturally important for rituals, weddings, and funerals, and are also considered medicinals. Another component to the market opportunities is the use of the native plants. Cultivation of native plants used traditionally by the Wayúu for cooking and in their medicinal applications. Indigenous flora like aloe vera and iguaraya, a native cactus, can be sold in the market. The designs. The students research locally sourced traditional building materials and techniques that will be used for several buildings in the complex, envisioning very simple and minimal accommodations to create a more authentic experience for those staying on the site. The complex proposed can accommodate about 25 people in private rooms and even more in a bunk house, and will have centrally located bathrooms which for all tourists that will be hooked up with the biodigester. The complex will have multi-purpose spaces, providing space for workshops, restaurants, and a multifunctional center for classes, tourist information, educational demonstrations, and cultural exchange with locals. A market space will allow the community to sell traditional crafts and products. With this proposal, there are some outcomes. Using technologies that can be maintained and operated by the Wayúu themselves, this project addresses at least 15 of the 17 United Nations Development Goals that you can see here on the right side. By providing long-term solutions, generating employment and opportunities for self-sufficiency, and strengthening the Wayúu resiliency capacity against the ongoing desertification of their land. We believe this small development could be widely replicated along the entire coast inhabited by the Wayúu. Moreover, this model of low-cost development could provide similar regenerative solutions for desertifying coastal regions globally, like in Baja California, in Mexico, Haiti, or Australia. Working towards a future implementation, we have formed a working group with Veronica and another Colombian colleague with support of Professor Hilary Brown. After speaking with some indigenous Wayúu, we learned that because many projects initiated without success, the first step to address is to gain the trust of the community. We also understand that a solid humanitarian response to the plight of the Wayúu cannot be tackled with individual efforts. It must involve all actors. Therefore, we created the following strategies. The first one is collaboration. It looks to build a mega community that focuses on cross-cutting and traditional and transdisciplinary collaborations, where the participation of the Wayúu community, experts, national and international organizations, private and public entities, and a multi-sector participatory process is critical. The second strategy is co-creation, which involves working together with the Wayúu community to build a common vision that reimagines the solutions and the development path in their territory. The third strategy is the circular economy. This project will work by replicating the flows of nature, seeking to use resources efficiently and minimizing waste, where the waste from one activity is used as the input for other. To do this, we have also developed 5 stages. The first stage is the definition of a master plan, which will involve co-creating and reimagining with the Wayúu community the solutions and each component to be developed. The second one refers to a locally sensible design, using locally sourced materials and taking into account the Wayúu ability to sustainably operate and maintain the complex over the time. The third part involves financing, which will be seeking funding to capitalize the project. For the construction and legalization, which will involve all the regulatory procedures necessary for the construction of the project. And last, the delivery, operation, and maintenance. This process will also include training and monitoring the local participants as they take over the project. Many of these phases will happen in parallel, like the financing. The construction of the complex will be done in stages. We have been working to start building this mega community. So far, we have consolidated important alliances for the project with 2 experts in indigenous intercultural dialogue with the Universidad Externado de Colombia. They are building a business model for the complex with their 9th semester students of the Tourism Administration program. There is an international law firm, Brigard Urrutia, which is based in Colombia, and they are providing pro bono legal advice for the development of the project. The nonprofit Caring for Colombia, based in New York City, is our temporary fiscal sponsor and is connecting with us to international funding sources. We also have built alliance with Charlie Payton, the inventor of the Seawater greenhouse, a UK-based company, and a Regenerative Resources, a company led by Neil Spackman, a US-based consulting firm experienced in ecological restoration. They have developed a similar project in Saudi Arabia. Currently, we are also finalizing our status as a nonprofit organization, which we call Akumaha, and it means to create in Wayúu. We have also developed an online detailed publication about the project available through Professor Hilary Brown's website that you can find there. Or if anyone is interested in knowing more about the future implementation, you can email us to fundacion.akumaha@gmail.com. Thank you all for your attention. And should I pass it to Hilary or to Catherine?
I think, Catherine, have you been collecting a few questions?
Yes.
We can do that via the chat, and then we can just, after that, we can open it up to other questions from participants.
Great. So the first question I see here is, how's the availability of woods in the region?
Should I stop sharing the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, or you can, yeah. I don't know, Hilary, or I answer the question.
I would like one of you to try, and I'll supplement if necessary.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Why don't one of you answer the question? I'll supplement as needed.
Okay, so basically there's almost zero wood availability in the area. The Wayúu indigenous community uses the inside of the cactus, which is a strong wood, to build their houses, and I think other bushes around the area, but there's been like an increased desertification, so these species are basically less every year. Like you can find them not as easily every year. Basically, what we have thought for the development of this project is that in La Guajira region, there's an area which is less deserted, and it's like a more tropical environment where you have, like, where you can find a bamboo wood. And that's the kind of like wood that we're hoping to use for the structures and different technologies of the park.
The next question I see is, did you consider offshore wind turbines for the project?
For this small complex, I don't think offshore wind turbines are necessary. They are like huge and very costly to maintain, operate, and install. These type of turbines may probably, I'm not sure if they're envisioned to be developed in La Guajira anytime soon. I hope some of the companies that are planning to install wind parks in the area consider this option, but it's like a different scale of turbine. Those type of turbines are larger. The one that we are proposing, it's kind of like easy to install. It can be lowered by 2 people, and it's a smaller scale size of turbine.
There's a question, do residents share land as commons? If so, is ground rent captured for common use?
So
Let's talk about general ownership and the value of land and how it's utilized informally.
So basically in La Guajira, especially in the northern area of La Guajira, which is the Uribia municipality, is owned by the Wayúu community. So they are the traditional owners of the land, and basically everything, including wind parks, touristic accommodations, and this complex have to go through their permission in order to be built in the territory. Basically, the government of Colombia has some kind of a political influence in the area, but the majority of the decisions are taken by the Wayúu people themselves. So here is where the co-creation process of the complex is extremely important, because they are the ones that need to create with this team and with the different experts and organizations the common vision of this project. And this way, they will accept the project and allow for the technologies to be built in their land. I don't know, Hillary, if you want to complement with something
No,
else.
I think that land ownership, I think, is really a complex topic, and the Wayúu peoples really look at where their ancestors were from as being their land, but they are itinerant and they do migrate. So that's why there's no effective ownership except that designated by the government.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on if the initiative was shared with the community, and if so, were there concerns or hopes expressed by members of the community?
So basically, we've talked with some indigenous Wayúu, and they've liked the idea of the project, but we haven't gone yet to the community because we haven't chosen the specific site for the project. We have to go and talk with the community once we have for like some initial funding for the co-creation process and for doing some of the workshops. Because if we start talking now, like in this stage with the community, it creates some sort of expectations for the community. So we have to be very careful in how to transmit the information and basically doing this co-creation process before, because what you just saw is an example of what could be created, but this can totally change once we start working with the community and going into the territory and looking into like the community's real needs and problems.
I will add to that as Hillary mentioned, because some indigenous, they travel from one place to another. However, the ownership of the land depends on where their ancestors are. Once we decide which one is going to be the site where we will develop the project, we have to go through a process where we identify the indigenous authorities. And through them, we can start this conversation. And as we mentioned, and Veronica mentioned, when we spoke with some Wayúu people, so many people go to them to tell them, we have this project, we want to do this, and then they start having hopes that something is going to build, but also they have learned that many people go with good ideas, they build something, it doesn't work, so they leave, and they leave them with nothing. So that's why we mentioned that one of the important aspects to start this or to implement this project is to gain their trust. And we have to be very, understand very well their cosmogony and the way that they see life and they see their land, to be able to start working with them.
What is the impact of the military base on the community and the project's success? Military testing similar to that in Puerto Rico that has destroyed the habitat around it.
I mean, I would say that the impact could be positive. I think that having some of you may know, Colombia has suffered an internal conflict, and to be able to develop a project, it's important to have like some sort of security near to the site of the project in terms of security. But I don't see how it would interfere, although the relationship between the soldiers that live in the community could somehow affect the development of the project, because soldiers are considered alijuna for the community, like not part of the community. We are not, if we are not indigenous, we are called alijunas, and soldiers, most of the soldiers would be alijunas, and they will not know how the community live and their traditions. They may know, but somehow I think it could affect, but I see it in a more positive way. I don't know if Hilary, you want to add something.
No, I think you've covered that. Thank you.
We had a very specific question from Erin, who's working on a project in Haiti. Erin, would you like to unmute yourself and talk about your project and ask?
Sure, hi. First I want to say awesome presentation. It was really detailed and I really enjoyed how you considered like aspects that, you know, are just so nuanced. So I'm currently working on a project developing basically a model-based reforestation plan of the Republic of Haiti. And as there are challenges when it comes to trying to balance the needs of the land, you know, to reforest it as it's stressed, and you already know desertification happens, the soil is eroded, as well as the needs of the local community, such as their reliance on charcoal production and food sources, obviously. I know this is a bit detailed of an explanation, but I just wanted to know from your experience if you recommend any type of approach when it comes to looking at this problem, and if there are any specific agricultural methods that you recommend for that.
Maybe I'll take that question, very nicely framed. Thank you, Erin. Because actually in past years, most of the projects that we've done have been in different areas of rural Haiti. So I'm happy to share with you what we've learned about best practices like terracing for agriculture, and the use of intercropping, as well as greenhouses in the area. So please feel free to contact me. And I'd be happy to give you some further information and ideas.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that'd be very helpful.
Erin, I think it may also be helpful to look into the Office of Regenerative Resources. They have different strategies of reforestation and working in deserted areas. I don't know, Hilary, if it applies for Haiti, but it's like a whole whole framework of how to formulate the projects and working with the community from the very beginning. So I think it may be interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a great recommendation. And Haiti has a variety of different kinds of climates, from tropical to the most desertified. And we've covered all of them. So I think we can give you some good pointers.
Thank you. That I really look forward to that. Thank you.
I believe we've exhausted chat function questions. Does anybody want to jump in and unmute yourself with a question?
I'll jump in. Thanks, Catherine. So first of all, it was a terrific presentation. Thank you both for that. I found that really interesting. I'm wondering at what point in a project like this does the government get involved, and what does that mean in Colombia? And when looking at the plans for ecotourism, I started wondering about taxes and how that works. I don't know whether this is really in your wheelhouse, but it seems like the hopefully getting the government on board would be an important step.
It definitely is. And it's part of the plan to ally with the government, because otherwise, I think funding the project has to be done through through different sources. One of them is the government, right? Here in Colombia, there's like some models that they even have started to implement in La Guajira, that they work with international cooperation organizations and kind of like join with the government to start supplying basic services. So recently the World Bank developed like a sewage system in Rio Hacha, for example, and there were like funding from the government and both from the World Bank. So basically at this stage of the project, we really want to involve with the community first and have that like strongly build the relationship beforehand, and after they trust the project, after they decide which type of solutions are kind of like viable and visible for them, then we can start involving the municipality and Uribe and La Guajira and seeking sources and funding sources from them. Because if we want this project to be sustainable over time, it has to be in partnership definitely with the government.
I could add to that that there are definitely funding from the government, from the royalties, from the Ministry of Tourism. They have specific programs to promote, although there are those programs are a little bit bureaucratic to get, but as Veronica said, once we establish the project, we could be more in a position to apply for this funding.
Anybody else want to jump in and unmute yourself with a question?
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's a very daunting, but also a very worthwhile project. My question is, when you negotiate with the community in terms of your design, whether you factor equity issues within the community, and also think about the system implemented by outsider or by the community with the community, will also distribute some kind of a power to the silenced, and also, for instance, women, in terms of solar energy, in terms of, that's just an equity issue, whether that emerge as a concept in your design.
So I could just start to respond to that. It's a very good question. I think that the nature of dealing with the Wayúu families, the multi-settlements in one unique area, is a governance issue, apart from the regulatory and land ownership issues. And maybe the model for this project is more based on the idea of a community commons, where there is cooperative participation, cooperative ownership, and cooperative governance by the community and by the leaders of the Wayúu families that live there. Nuro or Nuri, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, Nuri, I don't know if you want to add something or I can jump in. Okay, so I'll jump in. Basically, the Wayúu community also have, like Nuri mentioned, is a matriarchal organization. So women have a strong position within their community and they're kind of like leaders. They manage the commerce. So they can also take like important decisions for the community. Making sure that their voices are heard is within the co-creation process. So we're not only going to work with the traditional authorities, but with the women, with children, with the young leaders that are within the communities to hear the multiple voices, and as Hilary said, like create a common vision. And basically within this co-creation process, it's extremely important for the community to know how can they deliver something to the project. For example, they can supply goats, and that's their meaning of currency, but they can give some goats to the commons, and this way they are not giving money or like funding other communities, like as other organizations are able to do, but they can contribute through their work, through collecting seeds, through working the land, through giving goats, through their ancestral knowledge, right? So this is another way of building the project together with the community and including the women and like working with the equality issues within the same Wayúu people.
Great, great. In Barefoot school project in northern India, they have solar power system in any poor villages, and they train the women, particularly jobless women, to maintain those solar energy monthly and annually. They also have water pump project, and the water mechanic are also trained women to maintain all these water pumps. And they are called water pump engineer, and they are well respected by the community because they travel from village to village, and their job is to fix the pump. That I always admire the Barefoot College's project in order to raise and empower the most invisible and most challenged population. So, but this is, I think the comment is also a great experiment to see how they distribute power and distribute resources within themselves, and we'll see. It's always experiment to see what happens and see what experiment could be implemented. Thank you so much.
Thank
Any
you.
last questions as we wrap up?
Well, I think they're great responses from the audience and really useful questions. And I want to thank the two presenters who are, one is now in Colombia, one is still here in New York. And I look forward to their progressing this project, and I look forward to working with them. And as I said, if you're interested in this project, and want to see the publication, you can email me at hbrown2@ccny.cuny. And we can leave it at that. But Tony, do you have any other things you'd like to add before we close?
I will just add my thanks. It took us a bit of effort and a few reschedulings, and this was absolutely worth waiting for. So thank you to both of the speakers. Thank you, Hillary, for bringing this to my attention, and thank you, everyone, for coming.
Great. Thank you so very much, everybody.
You all.
Thank you. Have a good day.